Oh, good evening. We got like three on here. We'll give it a shake and see whatever on the topic. See who pops up. Okay, good. My audio. I'm checking it on YouTube. I noticed on YouTube there's a little less of a delay than Facebook. I don't know. Hmm. Probably pull up my chat. Somebody said something. Maybe hey, Pamela, I figured it'd be one of you two. So we'll have a friend joining in from California this week. I don't know if he's on or not. But, oh well, we'll see. So hopefully everybody has had a good weekend. I don't understand where all this time goes. Almost May. 2 weeks, well, a little, yeah, about a little less than 2 weeks before I head to South Dakota. So that'll be interesting. Hey, Peggy, how are you? Oh, wow. That's so wonderful. Still trying to get used to this new bit. Not good audio? Oh, man. Hold on. I think it's a Facebook. Let me check my Facebook. Let's see. Is it still being goofy? It sounds okay on my end. I'm on my phone on Facebook. That's really weird. Huh. Sounds okay on my end. I'm on my phone. Oh, maybe it is a little goofy. Hopefully this is going to pan itself out. So let's give it a shot. No clue what is. I think it's a Facebook thing to be honest, because I have talked to some people who do live, and I think you just start Facebook and just go straight YouTube. Well, hopefully this all pans out momentarily. I would say switch my Wi-Fi, but that's just going to throw a wrench in the old peace theory tomorrow. And we got Peggy, Pamela, Connie, and yeah, Connie, Pamela, Connie, Corbett. Oh, I never trust the numbers at the top with the little line. Is audio getting better at all? Hmm. Seems like this has more of a delay than it ever has on mine. I can talk about well, hopefully, momentarily. I'll give it a few more minutes. I don't know what everybody is this. Oh, everybody can watch. Not great. Not great. Okay. Hey, Corey, I may have to hop on this and try a good old reconnect. Don't want to. I messaged them last week and they said they checked my feed live. I'm perfectly getting better at all yet. You don't want to waste your time going along. Let me check it. It used to work perfectly, flawlessly. Now it's now it's still goofy. Does it sound a little clear? It feels like it's a little clear on my end. I may just roll all of cards with what I'm saying. Oh, Well, I'm going to cross my fingers that this whole thing just pans itself out as it normally does. So hopefully this. There's a weird slight emphasis on my. I don't know technology. I'm going to have to spend my day tomorrow after I set the black stone up and using it and all that. You know, look at the software and figure out what the heck is going on, or find something all completely different. Oh well, just another setback per usual. I'm used to it. Well, you know what? Let's just get rolling, and I think it seemed clearer on my end than it did. And worst case scenario, if I have to redo this in the future, we will. Oh, okay, well, mastering long exposures, right? Showing the unseen. I love long exposure photography. I don't do it enough, but it's one of those things that's completely different, you know. And long exposure photography doesn't have to be just night photography, fireworks. It can be more than that. It can be, give me one second. I want to check. I don't know if that's the truth. It is. So it's more than just that night stuff. Because when people think long exposure photography, I'll give you momentarily the short definition here of what it is. But I think it goes beyond what most people think. Yes, it's fireworks. Yes, it's extremely long exposures. But it can be during the day too, creatively and so on. Hey, Sid. So let's get a hopping. So, so I love this quote. Don't shoot what it looks like, shoot what it feels like. And that's what I think, to me, what long exposure photography. Like when I see water flowing, I don't see it where it's frozen and tack sharp and droplets froze midair. I see it as a flowy kind of thing. So that's how I shoot water. Um, I see fireworks as that not that initial burst, that nice long drawn out. That's how I shoot fireworks. So I think we can just use long exposure. I mean, I've talked about this in intermediate landscape with my students out at the Creative Photo Academy in Florida. And they we're talking, about representational landscapes and should you do it representationally, abstractly, so on and so forth. What I say is, it's photography. It's all in the eye of the beholder. I'm sitting here with one, two, three, four, five, six, seven of my images. Yeah, seven in the office. And everybody can look at those and all get something different. A feeling or whatever it is. We all may have opinions on what's great, what's bad, right? I mean, to be honest, do I like Ansel Adams' work? I do. But do I just like drool over it? No, not really. Um, that's just me. Some people will bend over backwards and argue me that's bad. And it's great work, don't get me wrong, but I should try to see Ansel Adams in the real world and it was not. I don't know. I thought it was going to be the awe-inspiring moment. Well, again, it's photography, right? We can photograph it in whatever way we want. There's rules in photography, but I don't like that those rules are set. Those are meant to be broken, right? So as we hop in here to what is long exposure photography. So the true definition of long exposure photography is when you use a shutter speed or shutter speed um, longer than 30 seconds. Not 20, not 25, not 2, not 1, 30 seconds plus, so minutes long. Right? And we're going to create photos where moving elements are blurred. Well, think of that. Where the moving elements are blurred. You can do that less than 30 seconds. Right? So it's long exposure photography in my book. So again, everything has a definition or rule to it, but I don't think we have to follow those rules, and that's the okay. It's just one of those things. Hey, Becky. So as things kind of, come and go, rules can come and go, right? So this is just like, the definition, but it's not a hard, steadfast rule. So let's talk about gear. I don't talk a lot about gear really here on late night exposures. I do a little bit, but this is one type of photography kind of heavy on gear. You know, well, I wish it was heavy on gear, but more than normal. Like usually most photography, if you have a black box and a lens, right, you can do it. it's going to work. Night photography, long exposure, working with neutral densities, it's very undoable handheld. Now, I will not say it's out of, it's not an option. When I went to Zion, we flew on Allegiant. I did not take my tripod, and I want to do some longer exposure handheld stuff. Now, with the image stabilization or vibration reduction or whatever your camera brand manufacturer calls it, a lot of the stuff is good enough that if you have the right breathing technique and the camera's held right, and you can hold some half a second ish stuff or and blur it without having a total wreck image. Now, is that the right way to do it? I mean, you really want a tripod. At bare minimum, you need a tripod, a camera, and a lens every time. Preferably a good steady tripod. But let's talk about gear right now. Obviously, sturdy tripod, right? It has to be sturdy. I don't care if you get. It doesn't need to be $1,000 tripod. It doesn't need to be a $3,000 tripod. It doesn't need to be 500. It needs to be steady. So for less than $200 or about 200, you can get a decent Manfrotto truck or a brand. Because again, if you have a rough, rickety old tripod that's loosey goosey, it's not going to be sturdy. It's not going to stand. It's not going to hold that camera steady. Right? So you're still going to get that play, some vibration things when you will then introduce a little bit of camera shape. So obviously, this I would prefer that you work in manual mode. Normally, I would not say that, but you really have to do like start working all three in the exposure triangle. You know, usually you're gonna probably set your aperture and ISO and just fluctuate your shutter speed up and down depending on the look that you're going. But again, this is gonna work best. I don't always feel like with neutral density filters, um, things like that it works as well. Now, could you go to like TV mode or share priority mode or whatever you want to call it? TV is Canon, or share priority is Nikon. That is one of those. It would work for the most part. But again, I think you need to control all three of this in the exposure triangle. Kind of and then if initial density you may need or may not need. If you were doing really wide open apertures, 1.8, 2.8 on really bright days, you're going to need a initial density. I'll go through that here on the next slide. If you're doing long exposure work during the daytime, you're going to need simple as that. When it gets dark, no need for it. That's just going to be a waste and extending exposure time longer than we need. Would it work? Probably, but it's totally pointless at that point. So I mean that. Oh, and I totally skipped over the remote shutter release. So something where you can fire the camera, whether that's using this device now, if you have mobile capabilities with an app within your phone to Wi-Fi or Bluetooth to the camera, this can be a wireless trigger, right? Click, click, and it will take pictures. Or there's the self timer, right? You can set it for 25 and whatever your camera has options for, and then when you hit the shutter button, it counts down, right? Or you can use a cable one when it plugs in, electronic one. Can you use the wireless like Nikon MLL3 or whatever your camera brand one? Yes. Or your Sony one? Yes. Sometimes if you're using it during the day, it's IR, so infrared. So it uses a little infrared laser. Problem is sometimes the sun will draw out that infrared laser. It may not fire all the time. I don't use the infrared. I usually use, well, 99.999% of the time I plug one of those buttons into the camera. So that's how I roll with it. This, if you have to have a remote shutter release, no. You can use the camera self timer. And why are we using these? Well, anytime you touch the camera, you introduce shake, right? It's going to give you a little jiggle. Well, if you have a timer, 10 seconds, you push it, the camera might move a little bit, it's going to count down. Probably within 5 to 10 seconds, that vibration will cease. There will be more. The other thing as well, too, is where was I going with that? Oh, you know, plug in one, not going to have that problem. So just self timer you can use if you don't have it. So let's talk about neutral density. So what is the neutral density filter? Well, I'm going to show you. So a neutral density, this is a missing neutral density. What it does is think of welder's glass. You know, when you weld, you don't want to burn your eyes out of your skull. So they have a welding mask, right? It's very dark, so you can't see through it. It's one of those things. That's all neutral density is. The neutral density's main job is to reduce the amount of light entering your lens to your sensor, allowing you to now extend your exposure time or shutter speed, whatever you want to call it, longer and longer and longer. Well, when you get into these, there are two types of neutral density. There are variable and fixed. There's pros and cons to each. I talked about filters and all other forms and facets on this show, and one thing that always happens is quality, right? Get a good quality filter, you know, 50, 60, $70 probably on average. You can get them into a couple $100, you know, on good brands, Nissi, Hoya, ProMaster, um, and this one, Hoya. Those are probably the four that come to my mind that are good. Um, this is very crucial in the world of neutral density. So what happens with neutral densities is they can get a color cap of blue, like a blue cap, like the ultra white balance in a sense. They give you that blue cap. A really good high quality neutral density filter will be very color neutral. That's why I like to shoot raw. You have a lot of leeway to cut that color if needed. The other drawback on in well, let's stop and talk about the two differences first. So you have the fixed and the variable. Now the fixed is a set number. So if you see at the bottom of the slide, it says ND 0.3 or 1 stop, 2 stop, 3, 6, or 10 stops of light reduction. Thing is, if you're buying a filter and somebody says, well, you need an ND3, that's not 3 stops, that's 10 stops. If they say you need an ND 1.8, not one, a little over half stop, it's actually 6 stops. Now, which one do I buy? Right? You need a 1, a 2, a 3, a 6, a 10, right? So any of them will work, but it depends on how much light you need to reduce coming into the lens. So that's where the variable can come in. So instead of inserting in your camera bag, adding 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 filters in one thread of filters, so let's say 77 millimeter, what happens is now you have all these filters in your bag, and obviously having weight and things like that. So you can go into what we call a variable neutral density. I will not buy a variable neutral density under 200. I've tested a lot of them when I did Photo Pro. And it's been a long time, so I could be wrong. They just don't, they have issues sometimes. The biggest issue is banding. So what a variable is, it's like all these filters built into one. So you spin it and it gets lighter, and you spin it, it gets darker. Now the problem is they are not marked to say this position is one stop, this position is two, this is three, six. You just get darker, you'll see your light meter shift usually to the negative side, you know, the underexposed side. And you're gonna either have to, you know, extend your shutter speed out most of the time to let in more light. And if you change that and go longer, your light meter should shift from the more negative side to the more positive or neutral side, depending on what you wish to do, right? So those that's what I use. I like them. I love them. Yes, I spin out the butt for them, and that's fine. It's like when I do use them, I use them. Now, you don't always have to use a neutral density filter in the sense for long exposure photography. You don't. Let's say you saved every dime and penny and picked up every penny and pop can you found in the world, and you went and bought the newest whatever 85 1.2 aperture lens, right? But you want depth of field, baby. You want to blur it all out. So what happens is you start shooting 1.2 outside on a bright day. Guess what's going to happen? It's going to blow out the entire image. It's going to be very um, overexposed. You're like, I know what to do. I'm going to crank my shutter speed way up, letting less light. Well, now you may be maxed out at 8,000th of a second on your camera, and guess what? You can't go any faster to let in less light. So you're like, I'm going to lower my ISO. And you might go to your lowest ISO, and you still might be overexposed. You're shooting on very, very bright, for example. A neutral density comes in. And then you can figure out, might be a couple stops, so you just put in that neutral density. Or what I like is I will just take my variable and put it on, And I will just move it, and I will see my little ticker on my light meter go from the plus to the overexposed side. As I spin it, it gets darker, and that's going to go right to the middle where I want it, right? And now I have my exposure. So the test shot, and usually it's good. So these don't have to be used just for long exposure and make really slow shutter speeds. Yes, Ricky says variable indies are my jam. Same here. Why? Because it's just easier. I'm doing more flying to destinations over this last year, right? And traveling with gear. So I'm trying to get less and less gear. Plus, I don't want 9 bajillion bags in the car of filters either, right? So I like variable. Get a good one. It's worth its weight in gold. There we are. So this is what a neutral density, variable or fixed. Oh, let me go back to fixed real quick. So a fixed neutral density is just going to be, I may have touched on it briefly, but it is literally just a true stop or a 10 stop. You can't change the density. So this allows you to do photos like this. See the river, fall colors, on a tripod, obviously, for all these photos that you're going to see. And it allows me to slow that shutter speed down to make that water smooth like butter. That's my jam. I love that. So that's how I like to shoot my moving water. That's just how I do it. Now here's one, no moving water whatsoever, right? A little bit. This wasn't really rushing flowing water. This is Coralville Reservoir. A little bit of, weight in the water. It was a very still, calm morning. That starts to turn it into a sheet of glass. Oh, thank you, Corey. So it's one of those that it doesn't have to be rushing water. It can be like just a little bit of movement to turn that layer of that water into a sheet of glass. It just has a very nice reflection. Then you start getting this colors blending in together. Then if you want, you can do abstract work. Take your telephoto, slap on a 70 to 200, a 100 to 400, 150 to 600, whatever telephoto you have, 70 to 300, I can keep going. You just zoom in on those colors and create abstract. And that's all things of new density. Or you can do your traditional, let's slow the water down and make it smooth like butter. So, this is roughly most of these where you see the water really flowing between 2 and 20 seconds on average. I don't usually extend beyond 25 seconds most of the time. Just depends. Now, how long you need your shutter speed too on occasion depends on how fast the water's going. If the water's rushing, like at Zion or at Glacier National Park because it's kind of flooding there, guess what? I can use a second or two. If I had a real trickle of water, I might have to go 30 seconds or longer. Just really. Yeah. Or this one. This was rushing water at Smoky Mountain National Park down in Tennessee. So again, lots of water coming at me, rushing again, probably between 5 and 20 seconds would be my guess. Not looking at anything. That's where I'm thinking it falls. This is one up by Guttenberg. Again, this was a little, not I wouldn't say a little trickle of water, but very, I mean, this was barely a quarter of an inch deep, half inch deep, and max maybe an inch. So that is one of those things where I had to go longer. This was probably 25 to 30 seconds to get that in, to get just enough movement in there to get it. Or this one, right? Now we're not talking about water. We're talking about a speeding train, 70 miles an hour through Boyertown, right? As I'm sitting there. This was one where I didn't use a neutral density. I could do, even on a brighter day, by taking my aperture to f8, f11, f16, guess what that does? Shoot a low ISO because I'm not sensitive to the light. Then I turn around, I use a aperture f8, 11, 16. Guess what? I'm not very sensitive to light on the ISO side. I'm not letting in a lot of light. I need a little peephole that I created with the aperture of say f11 or f16. And now guess what happens? My shutter speed drops to the basement and it starts to go slow. This was one where I propped my hands up really tight, and this was like literally, this is not seconds long. Because in that trainer to be really, but see how it's just a little bit of blur, right out of focus speed? That's like a quarter of a second. Just a split second, slow shutter, like probably a fourth of a second, somewhere in there. So it's probably under, I think under half, it's probably over half. No, I'd say it's about a quarter, or maybe 1/25th of a second. Now, 1/25th of a second is not really slow, right? Um, so super, like not super, you know, fast, but it's just that point where your hand holds and you're like, yeah, I don't know, I do not know, like is it going to be jiggly, wiggly, what's going to happen? So it's just that quick, quick, and when you're steady, when that train's speeding fast, human Christmas is 50, 60 miles an hour, right? That's a quick boy. Now, action closest to the camera, that train is going to be more street than what's farther away. Think of it this way: you're going 90 miles an hour up, say 75 miles an hour through the state of Wyoming. If you were in the car and you look out in the distance, right? You're like this is way out in the mountains, look like they're moving like this. It's real slow. And then you like plaster your face up against the car window and you're looking at the yellow line and white line on the highway, right? And it's like bam, 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 right? It's like really fast. Same thing. So it's one of those things is if you're trying to shoot something and make it like blur or streaking motion out in the distance, you have to use a much longer shutter speed to make that happen to capture that real slow creep across the landscape. If I'm shooting stuff very close to me and it's like bam, 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 I can use faster shutter speed. Little tricks of the trade. On the next. So this one. This looks like a very tiny waterfall. It is not. That is way up there. This is over like so good old Chicago. I can never think of this part. Um, it'll come to me later. It's got lots of waterfalls. So that is one of those things that, again, this was probably 10, 15 seconds long. Not a huge flow of water. It looks like a good flow of water. There wasn't much coming down. So think of it as a trickle, not in a sense, it's a trickle, let's say. And as longer you go on the shutter or the exposure, the shutter's open for longer, it starts to build in the image and start capturing. So, again, this is what I use my neutral density for shutters. Or like this one. What? This is ICM work. You've seen that work from me before, right? Well, guess what? Bright days that I go out and I want to do that intentional camera movement, sometimes it's super like bright. I can't get a low enough ISO set. I can't get an aperture set to a small enough opening where those two alone drop the shutter speed down to that sweet spot of a quarter of a second that I love, or a fourth of a second, you know. So I have to stop on a neutral base, creep down my variables, I get right where I want it, and then I start doing my thing. So again, it's not one of those things with that script you have to use it. No questions so far? Okay, well, I'm okay. I should say I'm okay. Um, so here's another one. Again, neutral density allowing me to do shutter speed work on a much brighter time. Again, or I see. I didn't realize I added so many and there we are. So let's talk about steps to long exposure photography. So think of it as there's 8 steps to long exposure. I'll go through those. This is going to work for a lot. So one, when you're doing this, and this is kind of with the use of neutral densities, is one you're going to, obviously set up that tripod. And before you do any filters, settings, whatever, frame that composition to what you want, right? Once you put that neutral density on, it's hard to see through the lens. You may miss it. You may miss things on the edges, branches sticking out. Then what you're going to do is just apply your a normal setting that you would probably photograph. Let's just say it's 100th of a second at f8 and you're going to take that test shot. You'll get it. And once you look at that test shot, you're like, okay, the exposure looks pretty good. You don't want overexposed, it's not underexposed, it's right in the middle, right? So then what I would do is you've already obviously focused on that subject. So you switch to manual mode and your manual settings, right? Why? So if you go back up to number 2 of applying your normal settings, you can use other other like exposure modes. you can to get the proper exposure. I would just do a manual mode. Now you don't have to go on switch and everything. So go down and now we're back to number 4. So you'll switch that focus mode. Why? Because on a neutral density, if it's dark enough, the camera can have problems with not getting enough light in the camera, obviously. Right? Because that's what we're doing, is knocking down that light, and the camera will struggle to autofocus. So you've already focused, obviously, hopefully, on your subject. If it's in manual focus, now I'm going to change. Then what we're going to do is we're going to mount that filter, whatever it may be. Um, let's say you think it needs to be a 5-step. Start at 5 steps. Well, then, Dennis's question: how do you apply the 8 steps when the train is rushing by at 70? That one I didn't use the neutral density for. Again, if a lot of people I tell, well, I'm a gut instinct photographer. So what I'll do is I'll look at it with experience and say, okay, I feel like that rushing by at 70 miles an hour. I don't need a super long shutter speed. So guess what? I don't need a neutral density. I can get away with a quarter of a second shutter speed. That's what I do. And in Iowa, the trains seem to be god awful long of like 12 bajillion cars, so I have plenty of time to think. I mean, that's the truth. So it's one of those things. Is I've done it before and I screwed it up. So guess what I did? I learned from my lesson. I So most of these, like this 8 steps, is probably going to work best for obviously when you have some time to think between the brain, right? Or between our ears. So on step 6, we're going to calculate a new shutter speed. What does that mean? All right, right? You just told me to apply my normal settings on at the top, right? Well, when you mount that filter, if it's a 5, right? And you were at ISO, I don't know, 100, you have to go 5 stops less. So how do we do that? 2 ways. Easiest way is this thing. You download an app for long exposure. I love photo pills, and there's 19 bajillion other things besides long exposure calculation. I've got one on my phone, I think for long exposure. I go in and it says, what's your starting shutter speed? Let's call it 100. Shutter speed of 1 over 100. Scroll through, I hit 100 for shutter speed. Aperture's not going to matter. It's not going to ask me usually about ISO. Now it's going to say, hey, Justin, what neutral density filter are you using? And I'm going to say, well, Mr. App, I'm using a 5-stop. Scroll through, like 5-stop, bam. Guess what it does? It tells you that your shutter speed should be this. Okay, so that's what I'm going to turn into the camera. Or you can go to the next arrow down and use your noggin. So can you go and figure out what is 5 stops less of 100? Yes. And that's usually 5 full stops, not quarter stops, half stops that cameras will do. Can I do that? Yes. I can count back in full stops from 8,000th of a second all the way down, right? Do I want to? No. Work smarter, not harder. That's how I work. One thing the military taught me, even though we didn't do that, was work smarter, not harder. But again, both of those will work, right? I mean, some people are used to using the old brain between you. That's okay. Can I do it? Yes. If I don't have my phone, I left the car or whatever. So those are 2 ways to calculate that. Next thing you're going to do is obviously you applied that new shutter speed. Now take a test shot. Now this is not going to always come out beautiful. You're not going to like hit and you're like, whoo, it's good. Let me just, work it from here. It's probably going to be maybe a little too bright, a little too dark. At that point, then you can say, okay, what do I want to do? Do I want to raise my ISO? Do I want to open up the aperture more? Or do I want to take my shutter speed even slower? Those are your 3 options. Which one is right? Which one is wrong? None of them. If you're at ISO 25, who cares if you go to 50 or 100? You're not going to introduce much noise. Option 2, probably not the best option if you're really worried about depth of field, right? Because you want everything in focus, and then that's the closest to that thing. And then you turn around and open it up more, you'll get a little bit more, less in focus, maybe not what you want. I would say best option is probably to go with shutter speed, go longer, brighten it up. Too bright, we go faster. Light, darker, or we just play with the eye. Those would be the two. I have pilot aperture. And you're going to have to do this. Now you decided, okay, I've got all the shots I want, and I have a different composition. You need to start over. So one, two, three, all through the steps. Maybe not all of them exactly, but I would say that more. Yeah, let's just call it all. Again, it's a process. The process you create, which I will talk about here, I don't know, in a month or so, creating some type of process of how we set through a photograph to get from this thing up here to that black box. So, and then obviously to this device over here. Every technique should have some type of process. So let's get into the nitty gritty now. Hopefully Connie's still on here. And Connie asked last time, what about night or fireworks? That's after this. So let's do night photography. These are general kind of settings, things you can do to start out. So pictures like this, right? Steel wool. Rub a 9-volt battery on it, gets all sparky and happy. It's awesome. You spin it, they come off, they down. This is a 30-second exposure. Do not light anything on fire. So if it's like right now in Iowa, it's dry and the grass is dry and there's no rain, please do not start a fire. So this is done on rocks. I like doing the steel wool thing, but it makes me nervous because I see people do it in old abandoned buildings. Is it cool? Yeah. Guess what old abandoned buildings are full of? Old dry wood. That's what happens when things get hot, pop off on fire. I don't know. It makes me nervous. I don't do it all the time. Or here's even a better thing. You're gonna do this. Please don't do it in old abandoned buildings. Do it where you're allowed to do it. Don't do it in parks where you probably shouldn't be. And if you're gonna do it somewhere, take a freaking fire extinguisher. Tip number one. It's super cool. It usually works better on concrete. You just whack it on the concrete. Usually it's only taking like 15 steps back. To do this, you put a bunch of steel wool, usually in a whisk, a wire whisk, like a cheap one from Dollar Tree. You put a rope on it, spin it around, and you hack it to break. So, quick down and dirty on how to do steel wool. Or you can get into this one. This is the longest exposure I have ever done, ever. Anybody want to take a guess on how long this exposure was? I want at least one guess. I'm going to start making everybody. And there's always a bonus. Now, patiently wait. This is where I need like a Jeopardy piece. Probably not a lot. You guess 5 hours, 2 minutes, 15 seconds, quarter of a second. Oh, come on. Somebody's bound to have an idea. It's just a guess. 1 minute. Longer than 1 minute. Let's get the guesses coming. I'm glad you picked 1 minute, Becky. No, less than 30. I give one more chance. Not a minute, not a 30. 10. Close, Becky. 7. 7 minutes. But actually, the actual exposure time was 7 minutes. But the total exposure time was 14 minutes. You're like, what? Whoa. You just told me it was 7 hours and 14. Here's the tip that I love with long exposure photography. Usually anything after 30 seconds long, you start to get what the camera will introduce from the sensor, what is called artifacts. These are usually little pixels that are hard to see if you get them up on your big screen. And they are, like, I call them like a burned out pixel. They're bright, there's no information. So you could go into Photoshop and take them all out. Nighttime, I'm pretty sure most cameras have this, but it's called long exposure reduction or something like that. Excuse me. What that does is if I take a 7 minute exposure, once the camera exposes the shutter, the fancy brain within the camera analyzes the picture for 7 additional minutes, trying to find those and remove them. Does it work? 90%. For Justin, who is patient as all out wit, that was a really long time. Nothing sucks more than a 14-minute exposure turnaround time, and you find out it's out of focus or it's no fun. So I did this with my friend Jeff down on the Cedar River. and he does a lot of light painting. So he's at that little orbit thing. He's spun in a circle. He has lots of light painting tools, and then we ran up and down this trail. I should say he did with a light wand, and he can change colors. It's a lot of fun. Now, do you have to do 7 minutes long? No. Here we had to. There was no moonlight. It was like zero night in the trees. It was pitch black. I'd be lucky to see the king in front of me. But super cool. You can get really long. Guess what else happens with long exposure photography? Each camera batteries like crazy. If you're into mirrorless, they also eat camera batteries. So guess what? You better have one. Like right now, I run my camera off an AC adapter that plugs right into the wall. I know some people who have rigged their cameras up with batteries and converters and run these into their vehicles and so on and so forth. That's really a nice too, but you can do things for it. The rail so if you haven't seen that image, it's one of my favorites. My dad came up last weekend for his like high appointment at the University of Iowa, and I got to send this beautiful 15 by 30 print Oslo pen to the Rialto Theater for them. So I have some fun. Was this long exposure? Nah, it's low light, right? We're talking about night photography. Yes. It wasn't minutes long, seconds long. This was handheld, no tripod. No tripod. Handheld at about 40th of a second. So you're saying, Justin, how are you doing the 40th or 50th of a second at night? Oh, yeah, you had your ISO at 12,800. Nope, I had my ISO around 400. So when something's really bright in the image, that's what your camera's metering on. So a lot of these will capture shutter speed. And I did that because I wanted all the boring junk around this. So the two cars, you can't see it. In the front, you can see it. There's two cars, right? They're just lit up just where the light starts to feather and fall out and the frame. Then there's just buildings and businesses around it that just don't match the neon reality. So I increased my shutter speed until I hit 40 50 seconds, somewhere around there. I know it got below 40. I don't think it was 60. It had to be 40 or 50 or somewhere in quarter. But that's where I can get everything. I'm looking at the screen. I'm looking at it and I can see I'm like, it's still pretty bright in these spots. I go faster shutter speed. Yes. But I was more worried about the exposure of the white frame around the movie poster and the inside door. I don't want to overexpose. Obviously, I want to overexpose any of the neon. So I just increased that up and up and up. So I got where it's happy. But then I had the magic of what? This thing over here, the other computer, the post processing magic. I could go in and burn and dodge, right? And do my thing. I really didn't do a lot of that. I did play with highlights and darken up. Again, it's night photography. Didn't have to use a tripod. If I would have gone really long exposures, if I had a car driving in front, I thought about that, but no cars were driving through at this time. I could have gotten the streaks of the taillights, right? But then that would maybe enhance the photo, but maybe I think too distracting, so I thought, there we are. So these are starting points, literally starting points. These are just tips, things you can do. Use a tripod, obviously, 99.9% of the time. Use some type of wireless remote cable release, so on and so forth. You're not touching that camera. Oh, another tip I did not say at all. If you were, don't walk around your tripod when you're doing long exposures. Sometimes, right, when you walk, you can create vibration. Or it could be like you kick the tripod and then you go up. So sometimes you'll get into walking around and you'll put little vibrations around it. The other thing is turn on that long exposure noise reduction. It's going to save a lot of work later. Get really, really good. This is one that I did not put up. Get really, really good at noise reduction within post process if you have to go a higher ISO. If you have not downloaded, if you're paying monthly for Lightroom, make sure you go out there this week or tonight, download the newest version of software or update from them. Because last year I kind of talked about, and I know we talked about this at Cameron Clicks and Coffee too. Clicks and Coffee about AI, artificial intelligence. And I said, guess what? It's coming to software, right? Well, my crystal ball was not cloudy that week because there's AI now in Lightroom for noise reduction. I have played with it a little bit. I still think if you're using Topaz noise reduction. That works a little bit better. But to save, is it $150 purchase better than Lightroom? No. No. I think if you run it's going to work just as well. So again, you can use noise reduction, long exposure, noise reduction, and the process. Get really good at noise reduction. Shoot the highest quality um, file you can. It says NES is ideal. That's a Nikon term. What's NES? Nikon electronic file. That's that doesn't tell me much. What is it? It's a raw file. So just shoot raw. Not CR2 containers. Shoot raw. Why? Because one, it gives you a very broader palette of things to work with. JPEG, you can tweak. I'm not bashing JPEG. Some people love JPEG. You know, but what happens is you get more exposure and more latitude amongst things and school. And obviously, you don't want to go really low ISO because, you know, go like really long exposure. Stick to finishing to it, you know. I would say anytime on a new camera, even a camera within the last 5 years, you're going to be able to go between, what do I say, like anywhere between ISO 100 to all the way to ISO 6400 and have some noise at the higher level, 800 plus, but it's going to be very negligible. And guess what? With a little bit of click of the mouse in Lightroom or Photoshop, you can just not do that. Sometimes people say a good starting point for aperture is f11. Sure, right? I mean, we're reducing light if we choose to. Take that one with a grain of salt because do whatever you want. If you are impatient, you don't care having a shallow depth of field possibly or foreground out of focus, go to 120, let in more light. You can lower your ISO now, shorten your shutter speed. So, the other thing too is instead of choosing the shutter speed, play with bulb mode, BULB. That means as long as that button is held down on that camera remote, it will open the shutter for as long as you want. Now, how do we calculate exposure time? There are apps that will tell you. Sometimes you'll go in and they'll say, um, you can put in 5 minutes, and it will tell you roughly your other settings. Other settings you should put in like aperture, whatever you want. But shutter speed or bulb mode works really well when we start talking about fireworks in a minute, but that's not how. The other thing is obviously turning off autofocus because sometimes, like on the Rialto, very easy. Super bright camera always on. If you have a camera that doesn't focus well in low light, most of these cameras do. Um, you just need just enough light for it to autofocus. But it really just depends on which. Some of these are little, I think, outdated. It is. Yeah. So some other ones, open up the aperture. I just talked about that. Guess what? I read my mind and talked about using a higher ISO, but not too high. If you have a Sony and it says it shoots 1.2 million ISO or whatever they claim to ability to shoot, and then you got to do it. Add flash or full light, right? Why can't I take, a flash or a flashlight, and I'll show you an image here in a minute, and light little parts up or a big spotlight light, right? That's called light dimming. Same thing, night photography. Um, you know, try a tripod to stay in focus, and obviously stay away from the shakes. There's some other ones you can do where you can do a long exposure and start where your lens is zoomed in on the subject, and when you click your exposure for 5 seconds long, zoom your lens so it goes wider, and you'll see. And you're gonna be creative, right? Again, use that bulb mode, which I just talked about. I don't know why I got to this. And then look for anything within motion, right? Anything that's moving. Even if you make it move, right? Shake the tree or something. Learn the 500 rule, which we'll talk here momentarily about, and then try a few test shots. Try different shutter speeds. Try different combinations of exposure and see what you get. And then obviously, we're going to adjust in post process any long exposure. I can you get away with no post process these days? Probably, but I anymore. You have post process. Any questions so far on anything? No? So look at this picture. See how those stars are little turning into little bitty worms? Well, they're starting to streak, but you don't notice that on the image below. I just said learn the 500 rule. So voila. So what is the 500 rule? This is a rule that tells how long you can expose the image for before your stars begin. Stars begin to trail, meaning they go from pinpoints of light turning into squiggly little ones. So this depends on the camera you have. If it's a crop sensor, if it's full frame, rules will be different. If you have a crop sensor, here comes the math, and I think math, you're going to take your 500, that number 500, divide that by the focal length of your lens, divided by the crop factor, which we'll talk about momentarily. This will do voila, tell you the shutter speed you should start at. Start at. That's the starting point. You're going to have to pick an exposure and check it. You have to go a smidge longer, a smidge shorter. It's a starting point versus the way to go. So, example, if you have a Nikon crop sensor, so not full frame, you're going to take 500 divided by the focal length times 1.5. 1.5 is the crop factor of the sensor. I won't get into that too much. So an example, I'm shooting with a 50 millimeter lens. I take 500 divided by 50 divided by 1.5. That gives me 7 seconds. It's actually like 6.66667 or something. You got to round up. We can't make a shutter speed of 6.66. So go to 7. Always round that up. So if it's 5.6, make it 6. 5.4, don't round up. Just go to 5. Canon is 1.6 crop factor. So you take 500, divide that by your 50 millimeter lens, divided by 1.6 equals 6 seconds. Now, you want that longer. One thing that's noticed to know is the longer the focal length, the shorter that exposure time is going to be. So if you use a wide angle lens, you'll be able to extend that exposure. So what about full frame? Look, there's a lot less to know. 500 divided by the focal length. Simple as that. You can show. So I'm using a 24 millimeter lens. 500 divided by 24 gives me 0.83 seconds, right? Well, that's 21 seconds. Try 20 seconds. Try 21 seconds. Well, how do I do 21 seconds? My camera goes maybe 15, 30, or 20. It gives me 21, right? Go to bulb mode, that DULB mode, usually within your settings called bulb or B on a dial. And if you get a really nice remote release, it'll have a timer on it. And you'll click, and you're like, watch it, it'll count 21. Or some of them you can program in 21 seconds, hit go, it'll count down, takes the picture, and then shuts it off. Super cool. But that's just the quick 500 rule. That's for not, if you're 600 rule, 300 rule, each their own, I guess. I don't know. 500 is. So, this image. Dennis asked a little bit ago, how did you apply the 8 steps when the train is rushing by at 70 miles an hour? Here's a very valid, what did Justin do in this situation? So, literally, midnight, 1 a.m., taking on my Nikon D80 2000, probably after basic training, so 2005. ISO 800, I remember that. This is one of those images I just don't forget setting. 20 seconds at ISO 800 and aperture at 8. So I positioned I was actually taking this picture without the car. There's no car driving through it now. I was just photographing a tree. So this is one of those I had some test shots playing around, didn't have it quite set. I said, wouldn't it be super cool if a car drove through? Guess what happened? The photo god said, sure, Justin, we'll let you have it. So they put a car on the road at midnight on a gravel road in the middle of nowhere and sent it through. And Dennis says, well, how do you do it at 70 miles an hour, right? And the train's going. I just was like, I don't know. I'm going to try better at 25 seconds. When you fire the shutter, if they're too fast, you'll get them halfway through the image. If they're too slow, they won't make the complete um, like rotation through the image or pass through. So maybe this was a lesson that taught me to be a gut instinct photographer. Some just said, take it, like twist the shutter on the remote release. I don't know, let it happen, and bam. it all worked out. Again, sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't. So this is what I love. I like car streaks and things like that. And I don't like long exposures. I love to shoot on nights that have full moon. Unfortunately, it only happens once a week, right? Because there's a lot of ambient light within your scene and a lot of less slower shares. Usually 30 seconds. Mm-hmm. So fireworks. Let's talk about fireworks. Fireworks is totally a guessing game. Obviously, starting points again, these are not set in stone. You're going to use a tripod. Have to be on a tripod not message. Use a cable release or a wireless remote. And you're going to turn on your long exposure noise reduction again if you wish. Some people say shut it off because, again, if you do a 20-second exposure, so you additional 20 seconds. Set the camera to a low ISO. This one I would say keep around 200 to 400. A good starting point for an aperture is f11. Know that if you want your streaks from the fireworks to be very thin and colorful, use a aperture of f8. If you want them to be very fat and flat and less colorless, use a wider aperture. I like f8 to f11. Again, instead of using a shutter speed, I like to set for 2 seconds. I don't use bulb mode. Bulb mode allows you to leave the shutter open and you can get like 1 and 2 and 3 and then let off. Or you can just open it up, let one go and let off and we'll close the shutter. I like 2 seconds. This is how I do it. What I don't like about bulb mode is if you're not familiar with it, you're not good at anticipating, from your noggin about what could happen, like if you leave it like really long open for 5 minutes, all of that bursts one after another, guess what's going to happen? It's going to add more light to the exposure. It's just eventually going to just over. I like a couple of seconds. Now, the other thing is, let's say you don't want to burst, right? Well, guess what I got to add on? Guess what I do? I do this. Put it over the front of the lens. All the bursts are off, going off that I don't want. Then I remove it and now I capture more. Turn off autofocus because it's not going to autofocus at all. What I would do is get to the place when it's still bright. Focus on something way out in the distance to infinity. With your camera's manual focus, put it on the tripod, don't touch it. And then if you focus on 20 miles in the distance, infinity focus is set, so now it's pointed at the sky. Right. We are wrapping up here. So images like this. I think it's great when you put something slightly within the foreground, something interesting, like some trees, just to give you some kind of ideas. Another tip, don't shoot this thing now. Why? Because I see bajillion fireworks going off, and they usually have a tendency to underexpose. Shoot like very short duration. The other thing, like this one, I like this one, but there's no interesting nothing. It's just color, right? But that's maybe what we want. We just want the color, the different designs. Again, several fireworks, city of Cedar Rapids. If you go if you're in Cedar Rapids, you go down to do the fireworks, you gotta get there like 2 o'clock in the afternoon, literally, and set stuff up and sit. Or hopefully nobody moves your stuff, because to get this spot, the only reason I got this spot was I was doing a booth for photos. And we sat up on the bridge and answered people's photo questions for the Freedom Festival. I was there all from like 2 to 10 or it was a long day. This is how we got the spot. So you need to go to get good spots like way in advance. And we are wrapping up here. So coming up, what is coming up? Late night exposures, right? Oh, I always forgot to mention, if you want, you can support the show at the top. If you wish, it's greatly appreciated. That's why I say about that. So what's coming up? Look at all those we have done. So next week is the image review, live critique. So I'm going to go up and take your photos and throw them up on screen. Here's a conundrum I'm running into. I only have one person to send me. I've decided if I don't have like at least four people send me a couple photos by Wednesday, I'll just probably cancel that. Unless I can come up with something else. Actually, let's do this. I just made an executive decision on the spot. So we did not do the inquisitive hour with live Q&A. So please send me your photos for critiques, even if you're not going to be here for the show. Right? Just send me some. Send me please to Justin at headphones.com, and I will download them, put them to a slideshow. I really would like to critique your work, not in a sense in a bad way, but right, we all learn from getting better. If you're not going to attend the show, that's fine. Send them to me. If you're watching this later, send them to me. Um, then we can do it. If we don't have enough, I am going to just do the inquisitive hour. So, worst case scenario, no one has questions. I will just stare at the camera until somebody does. Right? The more uncomfortable it is, the more participate, right? Now, everybody's really good at participating. Um, I would think more people would want to get more out of a critique and maybe questions, but either way, it doesn't matter. I will be in South Dakota the weekend of my birthday, May 6th, so I'll be gone that Friday through Monday. I'm going to reschedule the Maverick Method Exploring Unconventional Energy, and I'm super excited for, again, you're probably sick and tired of me hearing about this one, but Framing Life, a personal perspective on photography. Mr. Dennis Perry, who's on this watching, I hope is still on the show at the moment, is going to be a guest. So I can't wait for you to see this stuff. Dennis has this eye for color and just fun, different things like off the wall, not in a bad way, Dennis. Just a completely different way of seeing things, and there's things going, oh, if you're still on here, Dennis, post your Instagram handle because I can't remember it. I don't remember any Instagram handle. But Trent Holt is going to be here, and then Kent Peters will be here, a former photojournalist of the Omaha World Herald. And then third, you may know Trent Holt, a landscape commercial fine art photographer at a Geneseo. This is going to be super cool. So and then come that on May 20th, I will get these updated as well. Um, is we're going to do making versus taking a photograph on May 20th. Dennis Perry, all one word, is Dennis's Instagram page. We're going to talk about making a photo with a thought process, with intention, versus taking a photo. So we just pick up a camera and go play. Like we want to talk about using intention and instinct and line and form and shape and color and light and noggin and creativity versus just creating a snapshot. Then on 6.3, we'll talk about elements of the image. I think I don't quite know what's going on there. I think I want to talk about some of the merits. Is my idea of things kind of go off a professional photographer of America's 12 merits to get a merit for an image. They are a very good, solid foundation. We're going to talk on June 10th about what can limit you as a photographer. Then we're going to talk June 17th on creating a photographic workflow, whether it's a process, whether it's night, whatever it is, some type of process and things to think about. And then we will look at June 24th. I want to talk about seeing subjects in a new light. So how do we take something ordinary or something we see all the time or something we photographed a million times and how do we photograph it differently every time we shoot it? And then on July 1st, I can't believe we're all the way up to July talking before I know it. It's post-processing workflow. I think what I'm going to do is probably set my camera up over here and I'm going to work and share the screen off my iMac, Mac or my Mac Mini over here. I'm just going to work through how I edit an image from import to export. I think a lot of people will like that just because you can see my process and things like that. And you will find out beyond the import part, everything is a chasing squirrels and rounding up kittens kind of thing because I have no process at that point. I do, but not one, two, three, four. So awesome. So make sure you guys get out there, check out Dennis's work, get familiar with his stuff before the show, and give him a follow. So as always, thank you, as always. I appreciate everybody showing up. Thank you, Dennis, for attending, and Becky and Corey and everybody, as always, for all people. We didn't have as many tonight as we normally do, but that matters. So as long as you show up I'm going to show up every Saturday. You are welcome, Corey. Corey's been a supporter since day one of the show. It's been as well as about 99% of everyone else on here. So I think there's always something to learn. If you guys have ideas for a show, let me know. Things like that. So think about it. After July, I'm coming up on 1 year of this. 1 year, it's mind blowing. It seemed like yesterday I had this dumb idea. You're welcome, Peggy. Literally, I can't believe all this. The camera, the gear, the lighting, all this stems from my dumb brain and this thing right here, right? Dennis says long exposures are sexy. You know what? I should make a T-shirt. I don't know if anybody would buy them. Maybe you can comment if you would want to. I thought about doing some T-shirts that just had fun photo stuff. Like one, I wanted to do one for my fine art business. I run into this at work a lot. Um, People say, "Well, I want the best thing for cheap." But people say, "Well, I want a 40 by 60 for $100." I was going to on the front put my new fine art logo, and on the back it says here, um, cheap ain't good and good ain't cheap. Just for something fun, and that would be a good one. Then one exposure. Um, so again, as always, I will hop off here. We've been on for a little longer than normal, but thank you guys for showing up. You were welcome, Megan. I saw you pop up. Same with you, Peggy and Corey. So have a wonderful evening. Send me your photos for next week's live. I don't care. They can be anything. They can be macro, portraits, a fence post for all I care, a black, or a white cat in a snowstorm. I don't care. Send them over. Let's take a look. I think we can all learn something from each other's work. You might get some inspiration. So as always, thank you guys for showing up. I will see you all back here next Saturday. In the meantime, you got questions, you know where to find me.